Mandy Schmuckler. I've been making videos about this situation in the Middle East pretty much since the Hamas atrocities a year ago. Right now, I'm speaking at a time when the Iranians have launched a missile attack against Israel, and the Israeli response is not yet materialized. And I call uh, this video, escalation or restraint. The choice is all Israel's and not Iran's. Because I think there's an important point to be made here that I haven't heard or read in the various things that I've been following about this situation. It isn't necessarily a judgment about whether it is right or wrong for Israel to escalate, which appears to be what's in the cards. But it's got to do with the fact that the Iranian situation and the Israeli situations are not symmetrical at this moment. My position on this about the Iranians really not having any much choice is premised on something which you might consider debatable, and maybe it is debatable, but the premise is that no power involved in the world dynamic in which they have enemies, which includes both Israel and Iran, can reasonably be expected to endure humiliation and just take it lying down. That is the way powers generally act. For example, I remember back in the early 80s when the Argentinian junta attacked what the British called the Falkland Islands. The Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher, became a star in her country by launching a military strike against the Argentinians. I mean, it's all over history that great powers or powers that want to survive will not take humiliation lying down. And the Iranians are really in a situation where what they did with the missile attack was almost required of them in the general rules of the international system. They had already absorbed a variety of blows from the Israelis, including the assassination of somebody who was their guest right in the middle of Tehran. They had absorbed also the Israelis striking at their number one proxy force that they have been building up for years, Hezbollah, to a much diminished but not eliminated state. And they had not retaliated, even though they had advertised to the world that the retaliation is coming. There are reasons why they didn't retaliate, but eventually they reached the point. Perhaps, I don't know whether it was the ground assault that the Israelis launched into southern Lebanon that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, or more likely it was the assassination of Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, a very important figure to the Iranians. But something eventually reached a point where it really wasn't a choice that the Iranians had in the rules of survival in an anarchic international system. It wasn't really a choice to just take it lying down. And when I say that the coverage that I watched when the Iranians a couple of nights ago, there were all these missiles, 180 ballistic missiles that they launched at Israel, a serious attack. It was almost universally presented on the American media and discussed not only by Israeli national security figures and diplomatic figures, but by Americans as well, as such a huge affront to the Israelis that, of course, they would have to respond very strongly. I was struck that the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud oh, I'm not getting worse and worse at names. Omer. Said we have to strike back hard, and the former Israeli ambassador Oren, who speaks with as somebody raised in the United States, also said that, and General McCafferty also said that. Only John Brennan, of the figures I saw, said that restraint was called for. But the thing is, the Israeli position is really quite different from the Iranians. The Iranians have been taking a beating, and therefore they kind of had to do something. Maybe that was more than they had to do, but they also are somewhat humiliated by the fact that their strikes against Israel back in April and then again a few days ago have been essentially ineffectual. I mean, this one did some damage apparently at some base. Somebody in the West Bank was killed, but they have been really shown to be weak and ineffectual in a way that is pretty much intolerable for somebody that has the posture in the world that the Iranians have been developing for 40 years since Ayatollah revolution. I guess, what is it, 1979? So it's 45 years this regime's been in power. I don't see how they really could have just done nothing. But the Israelis are in a different position because they have actually had success in these recent weeks. I don't mean the situation in Gaza, which I think has been mostly a disaster for Israel, not just a disaster for the Gazans, but also a disaster for Israel. But in these recent weeks, with the way that they've struck it at Hezbollah with dazzling effectiveness, with the pagers and the walkie-talkies exploding, with the assassinations of the leadership, with the decimations of their weapon supplies. This has been a series of victories for the Israelis at very low cost. So the Israelis do have the choice that the Iranians do not, of de-escalating without appearing weak. So that's why the choice of escalation belongs to the Israelis, not to the Iranians. And the Israelis appear to be choosing escalation. I mean, appear to be in the terms of the words. There haven't been any actions yet, whether they're going to strike at the oil industry that is the lifeblood of an already weakened Iranian economy with all the sanctions, or whether it's going to be a strike at the nuclear program. I would wonder myself, if I were a decision maker to launch a strike, is there a way of eliminating their ballistic missiles in their in some kind of, like the Russian ammo dumps getting blown up by the Ukrainians? Is there a way of doing that? That would be perhaps sufficient. The Israelis have a choice between not escalating, like last time in April, where they sent a message basically by hitting something that showed that they could get through any kind of Iranian air defense and strike very near the nuclear program in Iran. That was a message, and that allowed the thing to calm down. They could do that, and they won't look like losers because they're already winners in Lebanon. They're already pitching just about a shutout. Well, this ground defense, it's not clear that that's going to be a shutout too. But up until that point, all the things that they did to Hezbollah almost without cost to the Israelis, with considerable collateral damage in Lebanon, but opening up significant opportunities. It has really been a very effective thing, which is why Netanyahu's standing in the polls in Israel has taken a leap forward. They're winners right now, and they can remain winners. If the Israelis were to de-escalate, the Iranians would have gotten their blow in, a kind of fig leaf over their dignity and stature and, the macho pose that everybody likes to take. and the Iranians and the Israelis would also be looking okay, and the whole thing could be the whole possibility of an all-out war between Iran and Israel could subside again like it did in April. The Israelis appear to be making the choice from all the words that we get. It's going to be painful. They're going to pay a big price. They're going to regret it. All those words are basically closing the door on de-escalation, it would seem. And it is the Israelis' choice. Now, I have identified myself as somebody who is pro-Israel in the sense of I want Israel to survive, and anti this particular Israeli government, which I think has been abysmal and has made all the kinds of mistakes you expect a fascist regime to make. Everything looks to them like it requires brute force, and come with if all you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That's the way fascists operates, and that's the way this Israeli government, the tragedy. Take a look at my video called "The Tragedy of Israel." I don't trust this group to make the right choice, but it could be the right choice to escalate. But you got to have a plan that is plausible, that is probable to unfold, of if the Israelis do retaliate in some really meaningful place, they will put Iran back in the position that they were in before they launched the missiles, which is they can't take it lying down. They are going to have to return a tit for that tat. And the tit for tat is what the escalatory spiral is all about. And where it leads, well, it's hard to foresee, but you have to foresee it before you make that choice. And I don't trust this group to have made that choice. They haven't had an exit strategy in Gaza that anybody's aware of. It's not clear how they're going to proceed with respect to Lebanon. Are they going to help the Lebanese government take back control of Lebanon from the Hezbollah? That's been the dominant political and military force in that country for a long time. There are good outcomes that can come from Israeli success. Maybe there's a good outcome that can come from escalation. I don't know how that plays out. And I don't trust this group to have gamed out in their minds how you end up with a world in which the Iranians have been weakened, but the whole region hasn't been destroyed, and in which Israel's chances for long-term survival are greater because Iran has been weakened and the Hezbollah has been weakened and Hamas has been substantially destroyed, and the Houthis, who knows what they would be doing with the Houthis down in Yemen. There are good outcomes that could come about, good for the United States even. But in any event, the choice is the Israelis. They're choosing de-escalation, can leave both sides to back down and have their dignity sufficiently intact that there isn't a need to escalate. Whereas if they do choose to escalate, we're off to the races. If they hit the Iranian, the Israelis have not directly launched any major direct attack nation to nation against Iran. Iran has attacked nation to nation. That's not a small thing, but what was their choice? What was their choices in the ways that the international system works? So that's why I say the Israelis get to choose. And if they choose escalation, the Iranians again will have no real choice. They won't be able to take it lying down. Nations just don't do that. Even when prudence would have them do that, backing down is not really much of an option for the Iranian regime. They would be forfeiting so much that they've worked so long and so hard to build up. It's not really realistic. So what the Israelis do now will cast the die about where the region is heading. Thank you. And if you are interested in following me, please, like this one, follow, subscribe, and for my analysis of things down from the nitty gritty, like this particular situation in the Middle East and the particular situation in the United States, where we're heading to an election where the nation will choose between democracy and fascism, and all expanding into a much bigger story about the whole thing that's happened to the human species since we embarked on the path of civilization, which I call a better human story. Please go to my website, betterhumanstory.org, where you'll see a lot of things, including an integrated picture of the story of our species and the nature of the challenges that are becoming the civilization-creating species has imposed upon us that we have not yet met, and that if we don't meet successfully in the next not so many generations, we will probably destroy ourselves. Whereas if we do meet them, we have a chance to create a kind of civilization that can survive on this planet for the long haul, in harmony with our planet and avoiding the self-destruction that is clearly a possibility in a situation where we have powers with massive nuclear arsenals. And I claim that this better human story, this integrative vision of what's happened to our species, can help us choose life and not death in the years to come by showing more clearly what the challenges are that our species has been facing and that we have to meet before very long. Thank you, and bye-bye.